Hi, what's for dinner, right? Yeah, hi, nerds. I hope you had some lovely bites earlier. I don't think there were too many brains in there, but so I'm going to talk about cognitive dissonance tonight. What's feeding your inner zombie? And it works. So I want to start off with a little disclaimer. I am not a brain scientist. Hello, volume. I work for Kaiser Permanente, and I want to also say that these slides and all of the content in this deck are my thoughts and feelings and opinions that have nothing to do with the company that I work for. But what I do for Kaiser, I work in one of their innovation groups, and I work on a lot of innovation projects that have to do with behavior change, and encouraging people to take on healthier habits, for example. So that's my Twitter handles, and we're talking all kinds of tweety stuff tonight. If you want to tweet this, that would be awesome. So I didn't actually realize that there was going to be a cheat sheet distributed earlier tonight. I was hoping that maybe I'd be able to catch somebody in the audience that would know how to define cognitive dissonance. But so for the people that didn't look at the sheet, do you have an idea of really what cognitive dissonance is? Is there anybody that wants to shout it out? Truthiness. Sort of truthiness. So let me just give you a little picture of what cognitive dissonance actually is. So the definition is when you hold two conflicting cognitions at the same time. So this has to do with any time that you're of two minds, right? So you know that you should be eating the broccoli, but damn, doesn't that cookie look good? So it's that, it's that conflict that you're having that, you know what you should be doing, you're actively, engaged with that, but you have this other conflicting piece of information that's going against your core beliefs. And what that actually does is it creates a physical discomfort in your body. And so what your body ends up doing, your brain ends up doing, is it's trying to balance that out, right? Because it doesn't like having conflicting ideas. It wants to be safe, it wants to be content, and ultimately, really, your brain doesn't like change. It's very, very sort of self-sustaining and self-protecting. This technique is very similar to what a virus called Toxoplasma gondii does to rats. So what it does is it hacks into the rats' brains and it turns off their fear response. So these rats go up to cats and are like, hey dude, what's up? And, of course, what happens, the cats are like, hey, this is easy lunch. And the cats eat the mice. Well, why the hell would a virus want to kill its host? Well, because the virus actually replicates in the cat's gut. So the virus also has this sort of self-initiating, self-sustaining, intrinsic need inside of it too. And so it's what your brain is doing, is trying to protect itself. And the stronger the feelings are that you hold initially, so those initial feelings of like what you are, your self-concept or your belief, the stronger those are, the stronger the cognitive dissonance is going to be. Which is why we end up with these guys, right? It's like, what the hell is going on here, guys? Well, it's because the brain is going through all of these different processes and different ways to come up with, to like justify and eliminate that cognitive dissonance. It wants to feel secure. So they come up with alternative facts to make them feel better. But this goes both ways, right? You also have the Bernie bros out there kind of doing the same thing, right? So these really, really strongly held feelings, these really deeply held self-concepts, it's like nobody wants to hear the conflicting information. So who came up with this stuff? I didn't make this up. So the cognitive dissonance theory has been evolving for a number of years. There have been a lot of studies. But this guy, Leon Festinger, was really the one that sort of coined the term. And he has this wonderful quote. So humans are not a rational animal, but a rationalizing animal. So, they're always coming up with reasons why what they're doing is okay, is better, or is not as, it's not as bad. And he did a really interesting experiment in the late 50s, he and his grad students infiltrated this doomsday cult, and it was great. And he was a Stanford professor, so you know this happened like in Berkeley or something. So it was December 21st, 1956. The world was supposed to end. The aliens were going to come in and rescue all of these doomsday cultists. And so Fessinger found out about this, or his grad students found out about this, and so they were in the room with them when the clock ticked over, and nothing happened. And so that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to observe what happened when people who have incredibly strong feelings about something suddenly are proved completely wrong. And what was interesting is that the people, these doomsday cultists were like, dude, I was just here for the ride. I knew that wasn't going to happen. Like they came up with justifications, and then actually what was even more interesting is some of them reconfirmed saying, you know what? The aliens didn't do it on purpose. Like they couldn't just justify it with like, oh man, I've been totally duped by this. So they didn't want to have any of that like sitting on their cognitive dissonance would not allow them to like give up that initial like deeply held conception. Because a lot of these people had like given up jobs, you know, and sold all their property and stuff like that. So they were very invested in this concept. And so that was just one of the experiments that were done over the years to help establish this theory, cognitive dissonance theory. And so it's something that's very difficult to overcome because your brain, it's like that animal part of your brain that's like, I don't like change at all. I don't like negative change, and I don't want to be confronted with these challenges. So the question is like, what can you do to overcome it? And really it comes down to being critical thinkers. We don't like doing that in America anymore. It's kind of a thing of the past, but it's what's preventing us from confronting our cognitive dissonance. And Socrates has this awesome quote. I love it. It's like, an unexamined life is just not worth living. So it's like really take a critical look at how you're thinking. This is sort of where this metacognition comes in. It's like thinking about thinking. So really paying attention to how you're thinking about things, what you're thinking about things, how you're deciding to do or not to do things. So here are some of the strategies just so that you can help become more aware of that. And we're going to do a little exercise too to really further along this experience. So there are 5 main dissonance removal strategies that your brain engages in whenever you're confronted with cognitive dissonance. So it's like that, oh my gosh, I'm being confronted with something that goes against what I believe. So the first one is avoidance. It's like, no way, that is so not true, I'm not going to deal with it. The second one is distortion. So alternative facts. Heard that before, right? That's another big one. So confirmation is when you read news that agrees with what you agree with, right? It's like keep going to Fox News and feeding yourself the same stuff over and over again to confirm what you believe. Reassurance is you just hang out with people that have the same thoughts and feelings that you do. Again, that's very similar to the confirmation. And then revaluation, which is the classic Aesop's fable of the fox. It's like, dude, look at those wonderful grapes up there, but they're so high up and I can't get them. Therefore, they must be sour. So that's when you change the valuation of the thing, and that way that balances out your cognitive dissonance. So those are the strategies that almost everybody has engaged in at some point. And what I want you to do then is, with that sort of in the back of your mind, sort of close your eyes and imagine a time that you were experiencing cognitive dissonance. And it could be something as simple as when you're having that conflict of whether or not you wanted to eat the cookie or the broccoli, or when you're puffing the cigarette and it's going to kill you. So it's all that conflict. So imagine that feeling in your body You know, where is it? Where is that tension in your body? And for cognitive dissonance, most people, it's in the gut region or in the heart region. So if you sort of bring up that feeling, sort of feel into it, and then what I want you to do is maybe think of a few other instances where you experience cognitive dissonance. And this could be something a little bit more extreme, like in the political world. You know, maybe there's something in the political world that caused cognitive dissonance for you, and it's like, ooh, I can feel the whole room getting a little more tense, and you bring up the politicalness of it. But the thing is like, where you're feeling cognitive dissonance is usually in the same place in your body, and how you're experiencing it is very, very similar. So regardless of what strategy you're using, you still are having that sense, that feeling. And so if you can start to tag that feeling and label it, you can recognize it when it comes up again. And then when you're in the middle of the moment, you're like, that's just cognitive dissonance. You know, now I have a choice rather than directly engaging in one of these, you know, strategies to dissipate the tension that you have in your body. But it's not easy. I mean, clearly this is not something that you just kind of flip the switch and you're like, cognitive dissonance, that's just something of the past. There's sort of 4 stages that anybody that learns anything goes through. So you have the first stage, which is what most people are in when it comes to cognitive dissonance, which is this unconscious incompetence. It's like you have no idea that you're doing it at all. But once you start learning, like, what it actually means, what cognitive dissonance means, where it exists in your body, how you can feel into it, then you can sort of at least be conscious when you're doing it and not able to change it. So you're getting a little bit closer, you know, you have to be aware of the problem before you can change the problem. And then as you build a little bit more competence, you know, you develop this conscious competence where it's like, okay, now I'm feeling it and I'm going to make that effort to not eat the cookies because I know better. And so you're starting to overcome it. And then ultimately you're really going to become great at it. You can just completely, you know, bypass that feeling in your body and you become unconsciously competent. It becomes second nature. You've like overcome these feelings entirely. So, the problem is that, like I said before, the more strongly you hold those initial feelings, the harder it is to make that switch. So just, you know, start on the easy stuff first. You know, don't try to go for like the really hard political stuff. And don't think you're going to be able to do this to or for somebody else either. You know, it's really one of those things where you have to kind of start at your, you know, at the inside and work your way out. But there is a little bit of hope for all of the extroverts out there, of which I think there are, what, like 4 in this audience? The extroverts, there's research done in 2009 that actually showed that extroverts have a much, much easier time overcoming cognitive dissonance than introverts do. And the research showed that the introverts actually were more susceptible, to the cognitive dissonance, and then were also more susceptible to taking on the thoughts or the opinions of the group rather than the people that were extroverts. So that's kind of something to think about too. It's like an added layer of complexity. But this is some data from 2009 just about the general population. About 50% are introverts and about 50% to varying degrees are extroverts. So you kind of have a 50-50 chance on whether or not this is going to be extremely difficult for you to overcome or if it's just going to be moderately difficult for you to overcome. But ultimately, it's a choice, right? And it's your choice. So that's all I have for today.